Okie dokie, on to the next system. All right, so we're going to talk about the endocrine system, and most of you guys are like, endocrine what? Like, I've never heard of that system, didn't know it existed, not sure if I really believe you, Howie, but okay, it is a system. So the endocrine system is all about those things called hormones, not just the hormones that you talk about when, you know, the girls are acting all crazy and it must be their hormones. No. There are so many hormones in our bodies. I'm going to touch on a few and what they do. They're so important for basically what we call as normal life, you know. If your hormones are out of whack, yeah, it's not so good. So there's some major organs when we discuss the endocrine system. Some of these, again, you guys will notice that they are kind of shared with other systems. So all these systems, what I'm trying to get you guys to understand is all these human body systems work together. They're not just designated like this is your digestive system and everything involved in the digestive system only does digestion. Not at all. Remember, the pancreas had a lot to do with the digestive system, but we're going to talk about the pancreas and the endocrine system as well. So you have the hypothalamus, the pituitary gland, the pineal gland, thyroid gland, parathyroid, right here, these little tiny green things, the adrenal glands, which sit on top of the kidneys, the pancreas, ovaries, and testes. Okay, those are the endocrine system organs, and we call them glands. Anytime you hear the word gland, we're talking about secreting something. And I'm going to get a little technical on you, but I just want you to know there's different types of glands. You have exocrine glands and endocrine glands. I won't test you on any of that, but there are different types of glands based on if they have a duct, meaning they secrete their hormones through a duct, like a tube type of thing, versus no duct, so ductless. Anyways, FYI. So the hormones are endless, really, when we talk about all of the different hormones that are secreted and where. So in the liver, the hormones that are secreted in the liver, not necessarily produced by the liver, but secreted in the liver, insulin-like growth factor, okay, angiotensinogen, kind of a crazy long name, and angiotensin, thrombopoietin, secretin, all of these different things. This is in the duodenum, which I talked about in the digestive system, that the duodenum is a very important part of the digestive system, especially the small intestine, because that's where a lot of different types of things are secreted to break things down, different hormones, different enzymes, and so forth. The kidney, you have renin. I don't need to go through all these, really. I mean, come on. It's not like I'm going to test you on all these different hormones, but what I'm trying to get at is look at how many different hormones are secreted in the body, okay? And this is not even all of them, just to let you know, because there's many other hormones that are secreted other places, but that's just in that area, okay? All of those different hormones do something very specific, very detailed, and it's very important, okay? So just know that if anything goes wrong with these, different types of glands, then you have lots of problems. So let's talk about these different glands. The pituitary gland is located at the base of the hypothalamus. So this is the brain, okay? Here's the cerebellum. This is the cerebrum. It's kind of a very light picture, sorry. You have the thalamus, and then you have right down here in this little teeny red thing is the pituitary, right below the hypothalamus. Hypo means under. So hypothalamus, under the thalamus. And then here's the brainstem. So you can see that the pituitary gland is teeny tiny, but the pituitary gland is also what we call the master gland. Okay, you also have, so I'm not sure if I talk about what hormones are secreted there specifically, but the pituitary gland is what I call the kind of the master gland of everything. And then if something goes wrong there, there's a lot of different things that can be affected. But let's talk about the anterior pituitary. You have the posterior and the anterior. The anterior has a lot to do with the growth hormone. So if you have issues with the anterior pituitary or lack of or too much growth hormone, you can lead to a couple of different things called gigantism, dwarfism, or acromegaly. So gigantism, obviously, if you guys, I don't think you guys are old enough to remember this, but the Addams family had a guy named Lurch, and he looked kind of like this guy, and he actually was, he had gigantism, which basically he had too much growth hormone, probably around puberty age. I mean, this was him, I'm not sure if this was like 16. This isn't Lurch, by the way, but this is a guy that suffered from gigantism or dwarfism, or sorry, acromegaly, where basically acromegaly is when they get too much growth hormone at a later age, okay? And at a later age, then it starts to make their hands very kind of fat, a little bit more deformed than as if you were to just be a giant, okay? Dwarfism, if you don't have enough of that growth hormone, you typically end up, much stunted in many ways. And this is just a picture to show, again, kind of the size of those hands. So this person had too much growth hormone kind of after puberty. Okay, so more pictures of acromegaly, gigantism, and dwarfism. So obviously dwarfism, I don't believe this is a child, because when I was looking at this, they were pointing at this person as being an actual, adult, a normal adult, and then obviously a giant. Crazy, right? And then someone with acromegaly, things tend to be a little disproportioned. Okay, so obviously the chin tends to be a lot bigger in somebody who has acromegaly. Okay, so again, so much that has to do with the growth hormone, which is a big deal because obviously it allows our bodies to be proportionate in different ways. So anterior versus posterior pituitary. The anterior pituitary has a lot to do with thyroid stimulating hormone, which when we talk about the thyroid, you'll notice that the thyroid has a lot to do with metabolism. And so if there's some things wrong with the pituitary gland, it can affect then the thyroid gland and the thyroid, some of the thyroid hormones. Prolactin, which is what enables women to breastfeed, so it produces milk. The posterior pituitary has to do with oxytocin, which is it allows for women to give birth via uterine contraction. So oxytocin makes those contractions steady and stronger so that you actually can give birth. And then antidiuretic hormone, large amounts of urine is produced if you have too much of that. But ultimately, there's a lot of things. Okay, this is showing the anterior pituitary and the posterior. There's a lot of things that are affected by this pituitary gland. So that's why we call it the master gland. So the thyroid gland, so this is the trachea. So your trachea is your windpipe, right? And here's up here kind of close to the larynx. So it's showing you right here is where the thyroid gland, it kind of sits right over top of that at the top of your trachea. So located in the neck region, there's a couple of different hormones. The thyroid hormone, which we call thyroxine, that controls your metabolism. So you'll notice that maybe I think of some people in my family in particular who have trouble with their thyroid gland, and it ultimately affects their metabolism, which is a bummer because they may eat really healthy, they may exercise, but yet it's harder for them to maintain a healthy weight. So that can really be a thing that affects kind of your weight. But you can also go the opposite. So that's if you don't have enough of the thyroid hormone or the thyroxine. But if you have too much, then you have too fast of metabolism. Okay, so I'll talk about that in just a second. So this can affect almost all cells in the body to increase metabolism because all of your cells are undergoing metabolism. Okay, they have to get their own nutrients for each cell. Okay. Also, it has to do with calcitonin, which is a hormone that lowers blood calcium levels, which your calcium levels are really important when it comes to muscle contraction. So, again, I'm not going to be testing you on specific things of each of these hormones or the glands, but I want you guys to have a good understanding of what they do. So, hypothyroidism, okay, or hypothyroid syndrome. Hypo means under, so you're underproducing that thyroid hormone. So typically, again, it can affect your metabolism, but it can also cause something called myxedema. Myxedema is an absolute, kind of crazy amount of swelling. Okay, these are abnormal amounts of swelling. Sometimes we have normal swelling, but this woman is actually not overweight. This is due to swelling. So if you have, again, this, hypothyroid syndrome, you can tend to, have this absolute kind of permanent swelling unless you get this under control. Okay, now here's something kind of gross. You guys know I gotta gross you out. A goiter, okay? Goiters are due to lack of iodine, and I have to tell you some stories because it has a lot to do with the thyroid hormone, but also a lack of iodine. A goiter is something that basically a growth that comes about in the neck region, and they can be really big, kind of obtrusive, scary looking things. And you don't see those much anymore because of let me give you some history. So back in, I'm not sure if it was like the early 1900s, I can't remember the time period, but they had in this particular area what they called the goiter belt of the United States, okay, and I think it was not quite it was like Midwest basically. And all these people were developing these goiters, and no one knew why, what was going on. Well, they realized that the soil was lacking a lot of iodine, and so they were basically deficient in iodine, And in order to do that, that helps them metabolize different things in their body. So that's why the metabolism of with iodine basically goes hand in hand with the thyroid. So basically, they just had to have these iodine supplements, and you were starting to see these goiters just disappear. But here's some more pictures of these yummy goiters. Pretty gross, right? Now, I hope if you get to this point, you might do something about it. Yeah, you know, come on now, something's wrong with you, buddy. Go to the doctor. Well, and I don't mean that to sound mean, because some people don't have health insurance. But nonetheless, these are goiters. I believe that at a certain point you cannot have these removed, because you are dealing with some vital organs right there, you know, so and some vital places that you can't just go ahead and remove all that stuff. I think in an early stage they might be able to do something about that, and they can actually cause one to maybe diminish with you know, some thyroid synthetic hormone type stuff, but also some iodine replacements. So anyways, there's a little bit on goiters. I bet you didn't know about that. Okay, hyperthyroid syndrome. So remember, hyper is over the amount. Hypo is under the amount. So you have too much of that thyroid hormone. And remember, it controls your metabolism. So basically, you have this sped up metabolism, and you can develop, if you don't control this with, you know, again, a hormone replacement that stops the overproduction of the thyroid, you can end up with something called Graves' disease, which is an elevated metabolic rate, also rapid irregular heartbeat, and weight loss, and exophthalmos. Okay, exophthalmos is kind of where your eyes start bugging out. So I've actually known a couple people with Graves' disease, but they've been able to control it so that obviously they don't get to this point where their eyeballs are kind of popping out of their head. So that is a real condition that can happen if you don't get that under control. In children, though, if you have hypothyroid syndrome, it's called creatinism. And basically, the children look a little bit different with a thicker tongue, a thicker neck, and kind of a disproportionate body because of too much of this hormone. So it's kind of interesting that at different times in your life, it'll affect your body differently. Okay. The parathyroid glands are found on the thyroid. Okay. So the thyroid is this kind of yellow-looking thing, and the parathyroid are these, you know, 4 little kind of dots, so to speak. They control calcium balance, so they increase the calcium in the blood by stimulating bone to break it down. So remember, I told you in the skeletal system, you have certain cells that break down bone and certain cells that build up bone. Well, if your blood levels, the calcium levels are going low, then basically this hormone will stimulate the bone to break more calcium down and release it into the blood. Okay, so that's always a good thing, because sometimes you're lacking that. Okay, so the adrenal glands, again, like I told you, they sit like a nice little cap on top of your kidney, like a little beanie or something. Okay, there's obviously 2, because you have 2 kidneys, and you have 2 parts to the adrenal gland. Okay, you have the cortex. It maintains ion balance. Hypersecretion can lead to Cushing's disease, so basically water, salt retention, edema, which is again swelling, and people that have Cushing's disease tend to have this buffalo hump, which is kind of like the hump of Notre Dame, humpback of Notre Dame, where you get this kind of you know, swelling and buildup of, you know, that it's whatever it is, water and salt deposits. That's what causes that humpback, but that's called Cushing's disease. So that's too much of, you know, the adrenal hormones that are being secreted in the cortex. Hyposecretion, so undersecretion of it, can lead to something called Addison's disease, where you lose a lot of weight. You typically get dehydrated very easy. So obviously, too much or too little of everything, not good. Okay, the medulla is a different part of the adrenal gland. Okay. The medulla has to do with the adrenaline hormones, which we call epinephrine and norepinephrine. And if any of you guys have any major deathly allergic reactions to things, you probably have an EpiPen, which is the same thing. This is epinephrine. Okay, epinephrine and norepinephrine, again, those adrenaline hormones, they're the things that basically increase your heart rate, your breathing rate. They're kind of your fight or flight reaction hormones, where if you're in danger, that epinephrine is going to kick in and you're going to be able to run really fast, like, you know, Superman. Well, he doesn't really run, he jumps. But anyways, those are those adrenaline hormones. Okay, hypersecretion, so too much is going to lead to a constriction of blood vessels. The heartbeat's going to increase so much, and blood's going to be diverted from certain organs. So that's what happens in the fight or flight. Now, you wouldn't want that all the time, but when you are in a, you know, kind of a situation where it could be a dangerous situation, this is exactly what happens. your blood vessels constrict to your vital organs because they are pushing blood to your muscles so that you can, use them and run and get away or whatever it might be. Your heart is pumping faster so it can pump blood all over your blood, and your heart rate is going to, your breathing rate is going to increase. Okay, so those are the different kinds of hormones that come from the adrenal gland. All right, the pancreas, again, a very important organ in the endocrine system because it basically helps with our blood sugar level. Okay, in your blood you have a certain amount of sugar that once you eat food, your body is breaking, your digestive system is breaking it down, and then that sugar, which it ultimately is broken into, is absorbed into your blood. Okay, and then it basically goes to different parts of your body to be utilized in the cells. But sometimes if you can't regulate it with hormones, your blood sugar level can go up too high, and that's not a good thing, and we'll talk about what that leads to, the diabetes. So insulin is one of the main hormones. This is what lowers your blood sugar levels and influences protein fat metabolism. So basically, after you eat, typically insulin is secreted so that it takes that sugar out of your blood and can deposit it, therefore the sugar can be deposited in all the other cells that need it. So insulin is very necessary every time you eat, okay? Because every time you eat, you're breaking that stuff down into those tiny, whether it's carbohydrates, fats, or proteins, but typically that's sugar, okay? Any deficiency in this hormone can lead to type 1 or type 2 diabetes. Type 1 diabetes is the type of diabetes that you're born with. It's called juvenile onset diabetes. You can't really get rid of it. You can't, you have to control it with how you eat, and typically you have to give yourself insulin shots. There's no way to get around that. It's very devastating because it changes people's lifestyles completely. So you just have to really kind of figure that out and stuff. So type 2 diabetes is adult onset diabetes, where basically as you get older, if you're not taking care of yourself, A, eating healthy, B, not exercising, and you live an unhealthy lifestyle, you are putting too much stress on a lot of these organs, and therefore they start to not function the way they're supposed to. So basically you can control this one with your diet and exercise. My dad has had type 2 diabetes for about 25 years maybe now. Yeah, I'd say about 25 years. And he's never had to take a shot of insulin because he's been able to cut sugar out of his diet and get back on track with his exercising. And so he controls it with his diet. But some people just do not allow themselves, to heal from that. And so therefore they end up taking shots and so forth, okay? Now glucagon kind of is the opposite of insulin. It's going to promote the breakdown of glycogen to glucose to release sugar back into the bloodstream, okay? So think about this. Some people have hypoglycemia, which it's like you don't have enough blood sugar, your blood sugar levels drop too high, and you get really kind of jittery and lightheaded and stuff. Well, glucagon should be secreted at that time, where it's going to basically take stored glycogen. Glycogen is stored carbohydrates that have been stored from previous meals, maybe a day or two ago, that maybe you didn't utilize that glucose, so therefore it's stored in your muscles. And glucagon will break that down to release more sugar into your blood system, okay? A lot of times if you're hypoglycemic, you just have to drink some juice or eat a piece of fruit, something with some sugar, and you start to feel kind of back on track. But nonetheless, that is kind of the opposite of insulin. It's going to raise your blood sugar levels, okay? So some pretty bad things with diabetes, though. If you don't take care of yourself, I mean, obviously a lot of people have to check their blood sugar levels, 2, 3, 4 times a day. It just depends. And you have to actually prick yourself. And now they have these great machines where if you just put your, blood sample on there, it'll test what your glucose level or what your blood sugar level is. And if it's too high, you know if you need to inject yourself with some insulin. So I've had a lot of students in the past who, have had to go out and check their blood sugar, give themselves a shot or whatever. But if you don't take care of your diabetes and you don't manage it well, guess what? It really affects circulation. And a lot of times if you have diabetes and you're not taking care of yourself, you can end up with amputations of the extremities. Your gums are very, very, very bad, and you start to lose your teeth because diabetes, you're basically, there's so many different side effects to it, but one of the big things is lack of circulation, okay? Your blood isn't able to circulate to all the places, and especially the extremities, so you see a lot of amputations. If your blood sugar level goes too high, you can go into a diabetic coma and you can die. So people don't understand the severity of diabetes and how important it is to keep track of that. Okay, so we're almost done. The amazing gonads, yes. So the other two, I think these are the last two, maybe. I don't know if I touched on everything. I think the pineal gland as well. But the amazing gonads are your testes and ovaries, okay? So ovaries produces estrogen and progesterone, and obviously the obvious occurs with this. You are more feminine, you're able to carry a baby, all those things. Now, not to say that men don't have estrogen in their bodies. So we as men and women produce the same amount of hormones, but in differing amounts. So women produce a lot more estrogen and progesterone than men do, but they still produce some, okay? Same goes for the opposite. Your testes in males produce a lot of testosterone, which doesn't mean that women don't produce testosterone, but just in a very small amount. So obviously the obvious occurs with men, with testosterone. You get, the different things that happen with a man, especially at puberty, whether it's hair under, hair on your chest, hair on your face, hair down there, just like women. But all of those hormones allow for sexual reproduction, of course, okay? That's the main gist of them, okay? But we all know, especially us women, we know that if your hormones are imbalanced for one reason or another, you have a lot of different side effects, especially in pregnancy. When your hormones are kind of all out of whack, then basically it's like, holy cow, you get night sweats and, this happens and this happens. So it's very interesting how much occurs when those hormone levels are just off. Okay, yes, I do have two more to talk about. I forgot how many, glands there are. So the pineal gland. Not a lot is known about the pineal gland. So if you notice, the pineal gland is located up here in the brain, and again, it's just this tiny little gland. But one thing we do know is that melatonin is secreted from this gland. And melatonin is really important because this allows us to sleep and not react to light at night sometimes. Some of us are a little bit more kind of sensitive to the light, so if you guys sleep in these pitch dark rooms, you might be affected a little bit more by light. But typically melatonin is supposed to kind of shut down that sensitivity to light so that you can sleep, okay? Especially even in people like live in Alaska or way up north where in the summertime it doesn't get very dark, okay? It's kind of like stays light until maybe, 3 o'clock in the morning and then kind of gets, anyways. But melatonin is very important, especially if you have sleep problems. A lot of people tend to take melatonin because it's a natural sleep aid. So anyways, if you have more questions, don't hesitate to ever ask me about that. The thymus gland aids in the immune response, which I think I touched on when we talked about the immune system, that the thymus gland does cause these T lymphocytes, which we brought up, which are white blood cells, to be secreted. Those fight off foreign objects, diseases, bacteria, you name it. So it's really important. Again, and you can see where the thymus is located. Here's the thyroid gland, so just below that here is your thymus here, right kind of in the middle of your sternum. Well, I shouldn't say that's the middle, but close to the middle. So again, that has a lot to do with the immune response, okay? All right, deep breath. So we're done with those. Now we have a couple more. So I will see you guys back again for yet another system. I think we only have 3. Hopefully this is kind of interesting to you guys, though. Hopefully. We'll see. All right, have a lovely time until I see you again.